Welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to Fallout, where today we're going to have a discussion video just talking about how difficult the Fallout games are. So if you're looking to play certain Fallout games or you're looking to get into the Fallout series, this will hopefully give you a rough estimation of how difficult I think that they personally are. I'm going to be doing this in two separate ways. One, talking about the normal difficulty for the game. So like if you're just going in, you plan on playing on the normal difficulty, you're not going to be changing any of the settings, and that's just going to be what you're playing on. And then I'll also be going over like the hardest version to play. And I'm also going to be giving these games a rank from 1 to 5. 1 being like the easiest. I feel like most people are going to be able to do it without very much trouble. 2, maybe there's some weird stuff going on about it, especially the older games. They tend to be kind of janky in one way or another, and I'll kind of talk about that. 3 being kind of intermediate. Most people I think are still going to be able to beat this, but you may need to play towards your strengths or something like that. We'll talk about that too. That's more in like the older games I'm specifically thinking of. 4 being that it can be a pretty difficult challenge, and 5 being the absolute hardest. I don't think that any of the Fallout games are completely unbeatable on like the highest difficulty for most people. I feel like most people are able to do that, but you might want to build in a particular way to make things a little bit easier for you. Because, I mean, I've done a bunch of challenge runs in like Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 3 in particular, where I've just been using like really stupid things or playing on like the absolute hardest difficulty at level 1 going to like the high level DLC. Now, Fallout 1, I would say in the normal difficulty is probably like a 2 or a 3 out of 5. It kind of straddles that line, where if you already kind of understand how Fallout plays, you're probably not going to have too much difficulty with it. It does play different than like the 3D games that we get in Fallout 3 and New Vegas, but it's not super difficult. As to if you crank the difficulty all the way up, I still don't think it's that much more difficult. Like, it's slightly more difficult, so I would say probably like the 3 out of 5. Mostly because if you already have a strong build in normal, it's going to be strong in like the very hard difficulty. The reason why I would say it's this high is because it does have certain things that are kind of difficult to get used to. It has a lot of old jank to it, like a lot of old PC games, and this was the very first Fallout game, so there was still like a lot of things that they were trying out, a lot of things that they were trying to do, and it does have like old RPG game aspects to it as well, where sometimes if you just build a certain way, you're going to have a much more difficult time than if you build a different way. For example, in Fallout 1, depending on what weapon style you want to be taking, you might have an easier or more difficult time, because let's say you picked big guns, and you pumped a bunch into big guns, and you were hoping to get big guns, and then you find out, like, you don't get a big gun until, like, 2/3 the way through the game, so the early and mid-game might be a struggle for you then. The late game's probably not going to be that difficult, though, because you are already built for that, and you're probably going to have this huge power spike. A far easier way to play through Fallout 1 would either be going with like unarmed and then just sticking with unarmed, because unarmed is insanely strong in Fallout 1, or going with like small guns and then transitioning into energy weapons, because small guns make it so the early and mid game is very manageable. You're not going to have too many problems there. And then energy weapons makes it so the end game is very manageable and really easy there too, because they are some of the strongest weapons. The main thing that you're going to have to get used to, though, in this game is generally the jankiness and kind of how you can interact with things, since there is access to go into different skills and then build towards them, and it's not super clear as to whether or not skills are good or not. Like, I might want to be building a bunch of repair, because in like Fallout 3 and New Vegas, repair is amazing, and I can have my equipment really maintained, and then you find out in Fallout 1, you use it for like one thing, maybe 2 things. I can think of 2 things that you use it for, to like fix up a computer, and then to like get through the super mutant bunker area, to just get through like the doors that they have there, and that's it. And since there's like a book for it, it's really not necessary. You don't want to really be putting any points into it. This one doesn't hold your hand very much though either. So like the first time I played through Fallout 1, I know I had to look up a couple of things, because I was like, how the heck do I get further down into the vault that you get access to right away? And it turns out like you have to get rope, and then you have to put those there, and then you can climb down the rope. Okay, that makes sense, but it doesn't really tell you that or hint at that. It's just sort of like, okay, figure out what you got. And it sometimes turns into a point-and-click adventure game, as well as there is a timer in Fallout 1 as well, where if you do run out of time, then you will just automatically fail the game. And you might get yourself stuck in a point where you can just continually fail it. The good thing about this, though, is that Fallout 1 isn't super long. When I streamed through it the last time and did almost everything in terms of side quests and main quest, then it only took me about 8 hours to play through the whole game. So if you are looking for a Fallout game that's kind of short, Fallout 1 could be really good for you, and I don't think it's that difficult. Up next, we have Fallout 2, and Fallout 2, I would say, is probably a 4 out of 5 in terms of difficulty. It is probably one of the most difficult games if you're going in completely blind and you're playing on a normal. On the very hard difficulty, I don't know if I'd actually raise it up, because there is some things that you can do, and if you know ahead of time, like, yeah, certain things can still be really annoying, but it can just be like slightly more difficult. So assuming that you kind of know what you're doing, maybe I would still say it's like a 4, maybe a 5 out of 5. It depends. If you're going in completely blind, this is another game where your build can just suffer right away, because it's another one where if you pick different attacking styles, you might just kind of have a hard time. Like, big guns and energy weapons, again, don't really show up till later in the game. This game is much longer, but those guns don't really show up too much. Small guns do show up fairly early on, but they're not at the start, and the tutorial area is actually like a really difficult area in Fallout 2. So going with melee, unarmed, or throwing definitely makes that way easier. There's also potentially more difficult random encounters that you can run into in Fallout 2. There is a lot of very tough things at the very start of Fallout 2, and it doesn't really let up at any point if you're playing through the game normally. Like, you can still be hitting potentially really difficult parts throughout the game. This is also when enemy crits were really scary in Fallout 2 as well, because you might be doing fine, you might actually have pretty good armor on, and then all of a sudden an enemy will just crit you out of nowhere and insta-kill you, and that can be pretty annoying, especially if you're not saving frequently. So, like, Fallout 2 has a lot of that, and Fallout 2 has arguably, like, one of the hardest bosses in all of Fallout at the very end, when you have to fight Frank. Since Frank is insane, he is a super mutant behemoth with power armor on, and Frank is really good at pretty much every fighting style. I think he uses energy weapons, and he definitely uses melee. I'm thinking his gun counts as an energy weapon, though. And if you're going to fight him straight up with no help, because there is quite a few things you can do to help fight him, he is arguably one of the hardest bosses. He has perfect special stats as well, 10 in everything, which special stats mattered a lot in the old games. And he also has like 999 HP too. So he can definitely mess your day up multiple times. And he also has a higher than average crit chance. And he also gets to attack more often. So he might just 100 to 0 you, like quite literally. Last time I streamed through this, I was fairly high leveled. I had one of the strongest armors on. He hit me once and did like 300 damage, and I had like 200 HP, so he overkilled me with a single burst from his gun. If he didn't crit, he was still doing like 30 to 50 damage a hit, so like sometimes I just had to hope that he low rolled and didn't kill me. And like, again, I wasn't super low leveled. I actually did a whole lot of stuff there, but he was very, very strong. But upping this to the very hard difficulty, if you know of the Navarro trick in Fallout 2, it's actually not too bad. So long as you have high outdoorsmen as well, because that made it so you could potentially skip encounters, and then just like run down to San Francisco, talk to the Brotherhood, run up to Navarro, get the power armor, get like a pulse rifle, and you were already like +8 in terms of levels. You could also get like a super sledge there. So if you went like energy weapons, melee, and outdoorsman for your tag skills, Fallout 2 really wasn't that difficult, since you were just so much stronger than everything else in the early game. You had more levels than that, and that could easily like get you into the mid game, which you could also get more levels there. And then into the late game, you were still struggling with stronger enemies, but you weren't struggling as hard as if you played the game normally. So that's the only reason why I wouldn't say like Fallout 2 is maybe a 5 out of 5 in terms of difficulty. If you know about that, if you plan on playing it normally though, good luck, because Fallout 2 can be pretty rough. Into Fallout Tactics. Fallout Tactics I would also say is a 4 out of 5 if you're playing on the normal difficulty, and a 5 out of 5 if you're playing on the very hard difficulty. Like, Fallout Tactics might be the most difficult of the Fallout games. This one you have to build your own squad for, and you can have a 6-man squad. And also, there's a higher difficulty than this, because in the older games, you could turn it up all the way up to, like, the very hard. And this one, you can turn it all the way up to the very hard, and you can also turn on Tough Guy mode, which Tough Guy mode makes it so that you don't get to save at any point during missions. You have to save in between missions when you're at the Brotherhood bunkers, and that's the only time you can save. And missions can take quite a while in Tactics, especially if you're playing in turn-based mode like the older games. If you're playing in real-time mode, the longest mission is probably only going to be taking like an hour, maybe 2 hours if you're talking about like the very end missions. And the difficulty slider in this actually doesn't really make you any tankier or weaker in that regard. It just changes your accuracy and enemies' accuracy. And when it's turned all the way up, I think it's like you get minus 20% accuracy and enemies get plus 40% accuracy, which is really annoying in the early game because you already don't hit very well if you're playing on normal. So, like, I don't blame anybody just to switching the difficulty down to easy on the first board just so you can go through it quicker, because otherwise if you're playing on normal, sometimes it just takes forever because your people just aren't hitting with their guns and you have to kill, like, through the raiders. and then switching it up to normal once you actually have some levels to your characters. This one can be a little bit more forgiving in terms of skills though, because you do have so many people on your team. You don't need to be specializing in everything. You can have a character that's specifically there to drive the cars, drive the vehicles, and potentially repair them as well. You can also have somebody on your team that's like a designated medic and a doctor, so you don't necessarily have to go for that. You could have people that specialize in different guns, so big guns, small guns, energy weapons. Those are all really good. And you can have characters that are even more like specialized to be like a tank. Like you can recruit super mutants or death claws for that sort of role, or humans can do it too. Or you can also recruit people that are like more designated snipers. Like there's one ghoul in particular that's really good at it. So like the game is fairly difficult, as well as the game doesn't tell you everything that you can do in Fallout Tactics. For example, one of the biggest step up in difficulty in Fallout Tactics is the St. Louis mission, when you're first fighting super mutants, and they are way stronger than everything else that you fought up to that point. They are much tankier, they have really powerful guns that can just kill you instantly, and some of them actually can kill you instantly pretty much all throughout the game. Like the 50 cal super mutants are terrifying, although it does work the other way around. If you have a 50 cal, you're also pretty terrifying and can kill just about everything really fast. And then towards like the end game, the robots can be really scary too, where they are very tanky as well. They've got very powerful weapons. Potentially the scariest weapon with the Gauss minigun, which can 100 to 0 you, really regardless of how tanky you are. Like, it can just be insane. There isn't, like, the random crits like there was in Fallout 2, but Fallout Tactics just, like, consistently stays tough. And you could go out of your way in between missions to go and find random encounters to grind a bit more XP, but ammo is also kind of limited in Tactics, so you don't want to be doing that too often since you get, like, the most ammo during missions. But it is, like, at least a decent way to get a couple more levels to your characters. Into Fallout 3, I would say Fallout 3 is, like, probably a 2 out of 5 in terms of difficulty, and even on the very hard difficulty, maybe a 3 out of 5. Fallout 3 is generally fairly easy throughout the game. The only thing that's kind of difficult in it is the lack of ammo in the early game. But if you went with like an unarmed character, especially if you go Iron Fist, that's not an issue, because you can just beat everything to death right away. Even on the very hard difficulty, it's really not that difficult. And if you go with like small guns, energy weapons, big guns, you have a pretty good build at really any point throughout Fallout 3. There's not that much like bad things that you can really go with throughout the game. And so long as you're progressing the story normally, they do usually give you pretty decent weapons that you can use all throughout. So I think Fallout 3 might be one of the easiest ones to go for, and it's also one of the easiest ones to max out your character with. Especially if you want to go with like high intelligence right away, then you're pretty good. Even more so if you want to go with like educated or comprehension or both on a character. That's kind of overkill to go with both, at least if you have high intelligence. But if you go with that, then you're pretty much set to go and you can max out every single skill and play every single way that you would like to. There's also the shotguns in Fallout 3 that are just kind of insane, so even on the very hard difficulty, it's not that difficult, since shotguns can crit with every single pellet, and you just get massive damage that way, especially if you're building towards like a high luck character, or you go out of your way to get all of the luck bonuses, which is pretty much maxing out your luck to 10, getting Moira's quest completed to where you also get an extra 3% crit chance, and then also grabbing like Finesse, which will give you another 5% crit chance. Altogether, that gives you like an 18% crit chance on every weapon, and I don't think any of the shotguns, maybe the Protectron's Gaze has increased crit chance, but all of the other shotguns, like even a 1x crit modifier with 18% crit chance is still really good, especially if you combine it with Sneak and you have 100% crit chance and those are doing double damage. There's quite a lot of ways that you can get overpowered really quickly into Fallout 3, so long as you kind of know about those. And there's also another way that you can get through the early game quicker if you end up heading down and talking to the outcasts. You can then just trade stuff with them, and some of like the stuff that you're kind of guaranteed to get throughout the main quest, like power armor, does trade for quite a lot. You can get a lot of 5.56 rounds, or you can get a lot of stim packs that way, and you're usually set for most of the game. Into Fallout New Vegas, I would say New Vegas is more difficult than 3. New Vegas on normal, I would say, is probably like a 3 out of 5. It's still not that bad at any point. There are enemies that can kill you quickly because they've kind of rebalanced the way that difficulty sort of scales in New Vegas. In terms of like max difficulty in New Vegas, if you turn on the hardcore mode and you turn on very hard, then this one's probably a bit more. It's probably like a 4 out of 5, maybe a 5 out of 5, depending on how comfortable you are with the hardcore mode. Because very hard, everything does hit you really hard, but you also hit things pretty hard in New Vegas, regardless of what type of fighting style you're using. Like, New Vegas did a really good job of making kind of every fighting style overpowered. Like, guns can be overpowered, energy weapons can be overpowered, explosives can be overpowered, same thing goes with melee and unarmed. Like, they can all be very, very powerful. Even being just a pacifist can be kind of overpowered in New Vegas, too. I kind of like the way this is balanced over Fallout 3, because Fallout 3, even on the very hard difficulty, was more like, you're pretty tanky, but then everything else is very tanky, and it just takes a while to kill. And it sometimes just turns into more of a slugging match than anything, which can be fun every once in a while, but when everything can be really spongy, it can sometimes drag fights out. New Vegas kind of did it the other way, where you can kill everything really quickly, but everything can kill you really quickly. The hardcore difficulty also adds a little bit to it, where you do have to manage like your water, your food, your sleep, and it also makes it so things like stim packs no longer repair limbs. So getting a broken limb is a lot more impactful to where you have to use doctor's bags. That might sound pretty bad, but it's really not that much more difficult than regular New Vegas, because like the food and water usually doesn't show up too often unless you're like eating or drinking a whole bunch of stuff that lowers that, in which case then you're going to have to build it back up. But if you're just playing through the game normally and you have food and water on you, you don't even need to carry that much. You're usually okay in that regard. Sleep is rarely a factor too. Usually you have plenty of time to get to a place where you can sleep. The biggest one here that people will probably have to adjust to is the healing over time and also the broken limbs. So now you can't really just face tank through a lot of stuff and then just spam like stim packs to get through it, where you could do that in Fallout 3, and you can do it in at least the normal mode of Fallout New Vegas. But also just like the broken limbs can be a whole lot more annoying, where you have to go to a doctor to fix them up, which can drain your money, or to where you're going to need to kind of ration out your doctor's bag so that you don't have broken limbs. It's still not that difficult to get used to this though, and it just becomes more of a factor of like, let me check shops to see if they have doctor's bags, and that's about it. But it is more difficult than regular New Vegas. There's more things that go into it. And it's probably my favorite version of like the hardcore difficulty that we've gotten in any of the Fallout games. And then we move on to Fallout 4, which I would also say is probably similar to like Fallout 3. I would say this one's probably like a 2 out of 5 in terms of difficulty if you're playing it on normal. On the survival mode in Fallout 4, though, I would probably bump it up to like a 4 out of 5. If you're just playing through Fallout 4 normally, there's so many things that are overpowered in Fallout 4. So many things that you can just buy right away, too. Like, the Spray and Pray is pretty overpowered. The Overseer's Guardian is very overpowered. Melee can be really overpowered as soon as you get Blitz. Power Armor is also very overpowered in Fallout 4, too. So, like, you have options there, and you get Power Armor so early on that if you just want to take care of it, you don't have that much of an issue. And even beyond that, you can get like the ballistic weave armors if you want to go side with the railroad, which is kind of just the best way to go. Not necessarily to side with them, but at least side with them enough to get that. That's just kind of the best way to go because it makes every armor just more overpowered. And like I said, a lot of the weapons you can just buy. There's also plenty of unique weapons that you could get off of enemies. Those are more common throughout the survival mode, but survival mode is more difficult than the regular Fallout 4, simply because they made it so you have to eat food and drink water constantly, which I don't really like. It pops up way too often for me. As well as you can't quick travel anymore like you could in the other games if you're playing on the survival difficulty. That's probably the thing that makes it, I'm not sure if it makes it the most difficult, but it makes it the most tedious at times, to where it's just like, I have to run back and forth to complete this quest, as opposed to if I wasn't doing this, then I could just quick travel. The good news about survival difficulty, though, is that you do run into a lot more legendary enemies, so you can level up a lot faster, and you can also get a lot more unique equipment. And like I said, there's a lot of overpowered unique equipment. If you get basically anything that's full auto that has explosive rounds or bleed rounds, it's pretty overpowered. If you get anything that just hits really hard with like instigating, it's pretty overpowered. So yeah, overall, I wouldn't say that most of the Fallout games are that difficult. The most difficult Fallout games, at least the top 3 in my opinion, would be Fallout 2 because of the random crits and just that the start is really difficult. Fallout New Vegas because you can make it really difficult and enemies hit really hard, but you can also hit really hard. And then Fallout Tactics probably being the hardest one because like the tough guy mode can absolutely suck if you lose teammates. You don't ever really get them back, so that's bad. And if you're going to be reloading saves, you might be reloading a save that was an hour or 2 ago, especially if you're playing on the turn-based mode. The easiest 3 Fallout games, I would say, are like Fallout 1, Fallout 3, and Fallout 4. 3 might be the easiest, and it's probably going to be the easiest for most people because it has mostly modern controls. It's not very difficult throughout most of the game, and just turning up the difficulty basically just makes enemies a bit more spongy, but you're also pretty spongy in Fallout 3 too, so it kind of just turns into more of a brawling fest. Fallout 4 kind of the same way, although the early game can be pretty difficult depending on how many things there are, and the lack of quick travel can be kind of annoying. And then Fallout 1 isn't that difficult, it's just it's an old game and it's very janky, so it can be kind of just difficult to get used to overall. Once you do get used to it, and if you played through it one time, you're probably not going to have that much of a difficulty playing through it on like the very hard difficulty. Tell me your thoughts on this. Which Fallout do you think is the hardest? Which Fallout do you think is the easiest? And thank you guys so very much for watching this. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.